Hey everyone, Mr. DVB here, and in today's video, I'm going to be ranking all of the games I played in 2020 from worst to best. So yeah, the title is a little bit of a lie. While 2020 as a year overall was pretty crappy, the gaming industry for me strived, with countless new titles released. By the end of the year, I'd ended up playing over 18 new games, which is definitely a record number for me. Now before I get onto my ranking, there are two games I want to talk about first that I have not come anywhere near close to finishing at the time of this recording. Those two titles are Final Fantasy VII Remake and Hades. To begin with, I'm not a fan of the Final Fantasy games, but I will say that the combat is engaging, the graphics are great, and the score is phenomenal. I just don't see myself finishing it. As for Hades, I've enjoyed what I've played quite a bit. The narrative is told in a very unique way that rewards the player for dying more, and for a roguelike RPG, which I don't exactly have much history with, I find myself enjoying the combat quite a bit. I think this game I'll definitely finish eventually, it's just not my top priority right now. Now with those two titles out of the way, it's time to rank the 16 games I played in 2020. Talk about disappointing. I was really looking forward to experiencing a fun online game during the start of this year, and I was hoping that this would be the game to deliver that experience. Predator Hunting Grounds was developed by IllFonic, who also helped create the Friday the 13th game. By no means is that game a masterpiece, but I've put in well over 150 hours because it was a genuinely fun experience with friends. As someone who really enjoys the original Predator film from the 80s, I was excited to see the Friday the 13th formula implemented into this series. What we got, however, was one of the most dull and uninteresting experiences in recent memory. Matches consist of a group of 4 fireteam members completing a series of tasks while fighting some of the worst designed AI I have seen in the game, while another player runs around as the Predator. That's if you can get into a match. During the open beta, my friend and I had to wait up to 15 minutes to join a game, and once we did find a match, we were disappointed by the overly generic experience we were met with. Easily my pick for the most disappointing game of the year, Marvel's Avengers is a massive failure. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to take a superhero group like the Avengers and turn them into a looter grindfest game, but that's what Square Enix decided to do, and it's a shame, because I can see the potential here. The first couple of hours of the campaign are filled with heart from its lead character Kamala Khan, and while I'm sure most people were hoping for the campaign to be a little bit more focused on the Avengers, it was a breath of fresh air to see the character given a lead role. Unfortunately, the fun factor with the campaign quickly dies the second the game decides to introduce the war table and integrate its poorly designed multiplayer locations, which are rinse and repeat layouts with different terrain. Combat can be fun once you unlock enough abilities for your character, but there's next to no reason to continue playing the game after you've beaten the lackluster campaign, as the multiplayer boils down to dropping into areas and grinding for crappy loot. All in all, Marvel's Avengers completely misses the mark, and we were left with an incredibly disappointing and mediocre mess that is lacking a ton of content at launch. Allow me to explain. These 3 Mario titles are genuine classics, but I'm not ranking them this low because of the titles themselves, I'm ranking them this low because of the package they come in. Not the actual physical packaging, mind you. Nintendo decided to re-release 3 classic titles at full price with hardly any improvements made to the games. Graphics are the same for all 3 of these games as they were on their original consoles, the only difference being that the game is now running at 1080p. Otherwise, the upgrades present are super inconsistent. Super Mario 64 sees no improvements besides the removal of a classic line. In my books, that ain't exactly an improvement. Sunshine now receives full screen support, and Galaxy runs at 60 FPS. That's it. Sunshine and 64 are still 30 FPS, and 64 remains at a 133:1 aspect ratio. All 3 titles should have received the same improvements. It makes no sense that they're all different. Graphically, the games received no changes, so 64 still looks very outdated. I wouldn't be as harsh if the game weren't full price, but even then, both the new Crash Bandicoot and Spyro trilogies saw complete rehauls a few years ago, and at a reduced price point of $40. It's super greedy on Nintendo's part, and it's a shame they didn't even bother fixing the outdated controls and camera work for 64. As for Galaxy, the game plays better on the original Wii, since the game was heavily focused on motion tracking, which the Switch isn't well built for, especially in handheld mode where the game becomes a complete mess. These are all still great titles, don't get me wrong, but the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection is kind of a joke on Nintendo's part.
And I thought my jokes were bad.
Fall Guys was a huge game for about a month, and then it kind of just died. I really haven't heard much about the game as of recent, but for the time that it was popular, Fall Guys was quite an enjoyable game. I often played it when my friends would come over, we would plop it on for a bit, and just have fun passing around the controller and running through the game's obstacle courses. Those are really my only thoughts on the game. It's fun to play, but it didn't have a lasting impact for me. Maybe I'll revisit it one day, who knows. Okay, so technically speaking I haven't finished this title yet, but I've put in enough time to know my thoughts. Sackboy is a pretty simplistic but fun platforming game that is probably the best PS5 launch title option for kids. It's a fun experience overall with some good level design, great music, and an adorable character at its core. It's true, Sackboy is so cute in this game. I found the general movement to be a little bit slow, so the game could be a bit sluggish at times, but it's still a fun, cute experience, and there's some fun uses with the controller features on the PS5. I've wanted a fully fledged VR Star Wars game ever since playing the short VR mission DICE created for Battlefront a few years back. Star Wars Squadrons is an amazing experience in virtual reality. Being in the cockpit of an X-Wing or Starfighter and truly understanding the scale of objects in the Star Wars universe was by far my favorite aspect of the game. The story here was pretty simple but offered up a good experience in the end. Multiplayer is a bit underwhelming due to the lack of available modes, but nonetheless the game is pretty awesome to experience. Outside of VR, I don't see it being too interesting since this is a flying game only, and you can't even walk around in the hangar. You're also locked to a first-person view the entire time, so I could see it getting repetitive pretty quickly. The first game up in my top 10 is none other than the most recent game I reviewed. I don't have a big history with this series, but I love the setting and suspenseful horror of Resident Evil 7, and I thought the remake of Resident Evil 2 was a pretty fun action horror title. So heading into Resident Evil 3, I was expecting more of the same, and I definitely had a fun time with this game, but it was a bit lacking in certain areas. The game is rather short, taking me only 4 hours to complete, and the setting was less claustrophobic and scary than the previous two mentioned titles. I still had quite a bit of fun making my way through Raccoon City nonetheless, and for the deep sale price I got the game for, I'd say it was definitely worth it. ASTRO'S Playroom may be a 2-hour demo for the PS5's DualSense controller, but this game is a straight-up love letter to PlayStation fans, of which I am one. Going through this game and finding all of the references to games and products from the company's history over the last 25 years brought a big smile to my face, and the experience you get with the controller is nothing short of revolutionary. On top of that, it's a genuinely cute and charming platformer that is a must-play if you pick up a PS5. I mean, you get to fight the PS1's Dino demo as a boss fight. That alone is worth experiencing this free pre-downloaded title. Yup, a Call of Duty game managed to make its way into the top half of my ranking. But I can't lie to you all, I've been enjoying this game a lot. Whether it's the short campaign that offered some great, memorable set pieces and locations, or the multiplayer that I've spent a good amount of time playing with friends, Cold War is a very enjoyable game. The trigger feedback on the PS5 is one of the most immersive things I've experienced in gaming, and playing this with friends has been genuinely fun. I loved the 2018 Spider-Man by Insomniac, and so I was obviously excited to play any form of spin-off or sequel they had planned, but heading into Miles, I was a little nervous that the game would be of the same quality of the DLCs for the 2018 game, which I found to be pretty lackluster. Luckily, Miles proved me wrong. The game is still rather short, taking around 4 to 5 hours to complete, but in that short time, they managed to fit in a pretty well-told and emotionally engaging story centered around the character of Miles. The winter setting for New York made the game stand out, and the improved combat was a blast to engage in. All in all, this was a good spit-off to the first game that has me excited for the future of these characters. Badass. In all seriousness, Doom Eternal is one epic game. I loved the 2016 title, and so I couldn't wait to experience the sequel, which looked to be giving us an even wider variety in locations and enemies. And while I didn't quite love the more arcade-like presentation here as much as the tone to the predecessor, and while the new platforming elements were pretty hit or miss for me, the new locations and combat, which was just as fun as always, made the game worth it. Gunning down hordes of demons has never been this fun, and that fantastic score backing this up made it one hell of a title. As a lifelong fan of the Crash Bandicoot games, I was so happy to finally be receiving our first brand new entry in this series in over 10 years, and that's exactly what this title was. A love letter and return to style of the original 3 games in the series developed by Naughty Dog back in the 90s. This is a classic platformer that can get extremely difficult at times, but I never wanted to put the controller down, and the massive variety in level locations stand out from the previous entries in the series. I also really loved the inclusion of the dimensional masks with their unique abilities that made gameplay constantly fresh and engaging. It was also great to see a bigger list of playable characters, including Dingo Freakin' Dial. Definitely some of the most fun I had with a game this year. Yes, this game. Understandably, Cyberpunk has received a lot of hate recently, and there's been a ton of controversy surrounding this game due to its performance on previous gen consoles. Disregarding those issues for a moment, there's a lot of excellent stuff to witness in this game. The open world is massive and features some of the most interesting characters I've witnessed in an open world title. The writing here is phenomenal, and I found myself wrapped up in the experience and completely engaged with the characters and their personal stories when the game decided it actually wanted to work. Performance-wise, the game runs fine on next-gen consoles with a target 60 FPS that usually lands in the low 50s, but my god does this game crash. It crashes more than the previous game on this list. During my playthrough, I experienced well over 20 crashes, which is completely unacceptable. It really hampered my experience at times, and it's a shame because so much care and time was clearly put into writing the game's story and characters. I just wish they put the same amount of work into making sure it ran properly. Despite those issues, I enjoyed the combat quite a bit, and I think this game gave us some of the most memorable new characters to be introduced this year. Technically speaking, the game should be lower on this list due to its current state, but underneath the garbage dump of issues, there's a fantastic game waiting to be played. This title seems to be a lot of people's favorite this year, and for good reasons. Ghost of Tsushima is a great homage to samurai films of the 50s, and it gave us one of the most beautiful games of the year, with its amazing open world filled with lush environments, vibrant colors, and detailed particle physics. Backing this up is the combat, which I found to be super engaging and fun to play, and then there's the amazing bombastic score. Its main story was a bit more on the generic side, but the side missions here offered some deep stories with memorable characters that were worth experiencing and enhanced the world of the game. On top of that, there's a free online mode, which I have yet to put a lot of time into, but once my friend's console arrives, assuming the shipment isn't delayed, I'm sure I'll punch some more hours into that too. Definitely one of the best games to come out this year, and Sucker Punch's greatest achievement to date. I never thought I would actually complete a Souls game, but in a year where eating bats caused a giant worldwide pandemic and the presidential candidates were Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I guess one miracle was bound to happen. And good God, am I glad I stuck with this game, because this was easily the most fun I had with a title this year. Demon's Souls isn't heavy on the story, it's heavy on the difficulty. This is without a doubt one of the most difficult games I've played, but the payoff was worth it. The game is gorgeous with its level of detail and variety of locations, the score is epic, and the gameplay is loads of fun when you're taking on the game's fantastic set of boss fights, which are already some of the most memorable I've experienced in gaming. I'm glad I played this because I definitely want to experience the other titles created by From Software. But despite being the most fun I had with a game this year, there was one more title that stood out to me above anything else. The Last of Us Part 2 is a game I'll never forget. Easily the most controversial game I've ever seen released. Last of Us Part 2 has divided fans like Moses divided the Red Sea. You have fans who despise the narrative and direction the game takes with its characters, and then you have me, a fan of the first game and a fan of this one. This title is not at all what I expected 4 years ago when it was announced at PSX, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't know how to feel after completing the game the first time around. I was shocked. I loved the gameplay, the score was phenomenal, and the game is one of the most realistic looking titles to be released, but the story had me questioning everything. It wasn't until I finished the game a third time that my true thoughts on the narrative came into play. Never before has a game taken these kind of risks with its stories, posed these types of questions to the player, and never before has a game grabbed me on this much of an emotional level. Naughty Dog made some bold decisions that did not work for everyone, but they did for me, and I won't forget this game because of that. So there you have it, all of the games I played in 2020 ranked. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.